Please welcome to the stage Rene de Silva with Populate or Perish. Populate or Perish, Rene de Silva.
Do you think that we have a population crisis on planet Earth? We hear it all the time. It's too many of us. We're too full. We're overcrowded. How are we going to feed everyone? We're burning through the planet's resources that are out of control numbers. Are out of control numbers. But here's a thought. Let's put the hysteria aside for a moment. Let's look at some facts and figures. Let's actually analyze some statistics. I can tell you that I've been hard at work over the Christmas break, poring over the censuses of various countries as well as independent bodies such as the World Bank, the OECD, and the United Nations. And it's interesting what I have found. For example, did you know that as far as population growth goes, we've already peaked? In fact, what was that number, that percentage that we peaked at? This is what it was. 2.2%. It's the highest it's ever been. And we've already peaked, so it means we've already gone past that. Now you want to know when did we go past that number? Well, recently, kind of. How about back then, 1963? That's over 15 years ago. It's called the baby boomer years for a reason. Since that time, there's been a steady decrease in our population growth rate. Not a decrease and a stabilization, but a decrease that continues to fall down to this day. So in 2014, where do we stand as a globe? About 1.15%. So that rate's nearly been cut in half in the last 50 years. Let's talk a bit about how we make people. Not that way, but let's talk about how they come about. Birth rates, obviously. Now, do you know what is the statistic to have a sustainable population? What's the birth rate that a country's got to maintain? Well, this is what that number is. It's 2.1 per woman of childbearing age. That means she's going to have 2.1 children to replace herself plus one male, obviously. So 10 women of childbearing age in a country to sustain the population need to have 21 kids between them. The extra 1 person in 10 is to factor in for early death due to accident, illness, etc., etc. In developing countries, that figure is actually 2.3 because of higher rates of death, higher rates of mortality, obviously more prevalence of illnesses, sicknesses, higher accident rates, less high quality healthcare that we are privileged to have in this country. So that's the rate there. Now, it'll interest you to know that there's 240 countries and territories in the world. Out of these 240, 99 have a birth rate of 2.1 or above. That leaves over, or approximately 140 that don't, over half the world's countries. Where do we stand as a nation? Well, Australia's is approximately about 1.4 children per woman of childbearing age, which puts us roughly about 1/60th in the world. So what's happening? What's going on? Why this falling down of birth rates nearly almost everywhere in the world? Well, there are reasons for this. Education's got a big part to do with it. When I say education, I'm talking primarily the education of women in our societies. Once that they receive an education, all of a sudden their options multiply manyfold. And it's not just about housewives and making babies. They have a bit of power now. They've got options. They can go out and do other things in their life. That has been the single biggest factor for our falling population rates. Let me give you an example, and I'll use one from a personal example too. Take India, one of the countries with the largest populations in the world. Now back in 1960, the literacy rate for females was about 30%. Therefore, in that time, the average Indian woman of childbearing age had 6 children. Fast forward to 2014, and this rate's gone up to about 65%. So it's more than doubled. Today, the average Indian woman of childbearing age has 2.4 children. And I was saying about a personal example. My mother's one of 5 kids. My dad's one of 10 kids. Today, I'm one of 2 kids. But other factors go in as well. Of course, the availability and regular use of contraceptives these days, both male and female. People putting self-fulfillment, education, travel, careers earlier on in their lives, making that a priority, as well as people just basically deciding not to have kids, which is all contributing towards our falling rates. Now, you might have heard recently that our population hit 7 billion. Did you also realize, though, that the first time in history is actually taken longer than the previous billion? So the first billion took forever, the second billion took 100 odd years, the third billion, 30 years. To go from 5 to 6 billion took 12 years, to go from 6 to 7 billion took us nearly 14 years, so the process has already begun. We are predicted to max out by population experts at about 9 billion people in the year 2070, after which the last countries in the world, last developing countries, will have population or birth rates below the replacement 2.1, and then we go into a decline from there on. We are predicted to have only about, looking really much further now, 3 billion people by the year 2300, and to lose an additional billion every century after that, until one day we finally are at. Because as the rule of the universe goes, if something is made, it eventually one day will be unmade. So to answer that question we asked at the very beginning, do we have a population crisis on planet Earth? Do we have a population problem? Tell you what we have. We have a wealth distribution problem on planet Earth. So in the meantime, just enjoy each other while we last. Mr. Josnas.